everyone, and welcome to the webinar, Enhancing Media and Digital Literacy Interventions. It is organized by REMEDIS, Rethinking Media Literacy and Digital Skills in Europe projects. I'm Niina Sormanen from the University of Jyväskylä, and I'm hosting this webinar with colleagues from REMEDIS. So for today, we are focusing on the proceedings and results of our comprehensive systematic evidence review. Key people are giving presentations. First, Lien Diengs, our project coordinator of REMEDIS from Kuuleuven, will introduce the project. Erika Maksniemi from the University of Helsinki will tell about the main results of the systematic evidence review. Maarit Puuse from the University of Tartu will tell about the moderators and mediators of interventions. Gemma Martinez from Universidad del País Vasco, University of the Basque Country, will tell about success and barrier factors of interventions. And finally, Diego Martinez from the London School of Economics and Political Sciences will introduce the theory of change and next steps of the project. At the end, we will have a question and answer section and hopefully have time for a few questions. In the meantime, during the presentations, you can post questions to the chat and we can try to go through them, or we will answer you through email later on. We are recording the presentations, but we won't record the questions from the audience, or they will be cut off the recording. So let's start and give the floor to Lien.
Well, thank you very much, Niina, for this introduction. I'm trying to get the slides further, but so far I'm not successful in it. So maybe this can be done centrally. Welcome, everybody, for your attention to this webinar. Today we will share with you the main goals and the challenges of the REMEDIS project, which is an interdisciplinary collaboration spanning 6 countries: Belgium, Estonia, Finland, Poland, Spain, and the United Kingdom. So what are our goals and what are the challenges? So the main goal is, in fact, to promote and assess interventions, call them initiatives, that promote media literacy and digital skills, leading to a deeper understanding of their positive outcomes. Needless to say, it is a challenging digital terrain. In a rapidly evolving digital world, navigating the complexities of that world can be really daunting for a lot of people, primarily due to insufficient digital skills. So despite all of this, there is a conspicuous absence of consistent evidence-based information regarding the impact of media literacy and digital skills interventions. And it's particularly that gap that our REMEDIS project seeks to address. So who are we? We are together a team of 7 academic partners, and you can see here on the slide which universities are involved in REMEDIS, together with 14 organizations that organize promising media literacy and digital skills interventions. And through this collaboration, bringing together, for instance, media literacy agencies and policy bodies, together we will eventually work towards an evidence-based set of policy recommendations and a hands-on toolkit. What are the key impacts that we would like to make with REMEDIS? So first of all, we will provide our stakeholders with a systematic evidence review, and we'll present the results and the procedures today, later in the webinar. A systematic evidence review of the key factors influencing media literacy and digital skills, along with user-friendly guidance developed in collaboration with our stakeholders. REMEDIS also aims to establish a platform for the exchange of first-hand experiences among media and media literacy and digital literacy agencies and their partners, fostering in that way collaboration and shared insights. We will offer a user-friendly toolkit for practitioners to effectively assess existing intervention programs and policy recommendations so that we can make more informed decisions. REMEDIS addresses a diverse range of target groups, including disadvantaged families, unemployed, refugees, the elderly, future teachers. So we have made so far, because we're already over half of the project, or we have already spent quite some time together, we made also substantial progress in the initial year of the project with this systematic evidence review, forming the foundations for enhancing, improving these media literacy and digital skills interventions. So what it all boils down to is a co-design process. And this co-design phase for enhancing the intervention program started already last year during the months of July, August, September with our partners who were actively engaged in that process. And we will soon start the analysis of our pre- and our post-intervention data. We invite you, therefore, to explore our website, where you can find our blog posts featuring presentations of the academic partners, but also of the partners who run the 14 intervention programs. And we also made a policy brief, the first policy brief, which we will translate soon in many more other languages than English. And these are the two reports, actually, with the QR codes that allow you to consult these projects or these reports more easily. These are the two reports we will talk about in greater detail in the rest of the webinar. So thank you again for joining us. And I now give the floor to my colleague Erica from Helsinki University, who will discuss the main results of the systematic evidence review.
Okay, hi. My name is Erika Maksniemi, and I'm going to present you our main results on behalf of our whole team. Does it work? No? No. Yes, no. So what we did was that we systematically analyzed literature related to intervention programs that emphasized media literacy and digital skills. And we conducted this systematic review because the literature is lacking knowledge how impactful different media literacy and digital skills interventions actually are, and what kind of positive outcomes the interventions have and what have been reported earlier. In our review, we focused on building new knowledge about the characteristics of different effective interventions that lead to positive outcomes. So we reviewed articles that were published between 2012 and 2022, and they were published in English. If you are interested to see more about the database and our search protocol, I encourage you to visit our website and see the full report. But in the end, after all this going through the literature, we ended up a total of 248 studies that were included in our review. However, not all of the 248 studies were included in our effect size calculations because some of the studies did not report these measures that we needed to the calculations, or the research designs was not suitable to make such effect size calculations, for example, survey research and so on. But in the end, we had 119 studies that we included in our effect size calculations. Based on our review, we noticed that a majority of studies did have a clear theoretical basis, but we also noticed that the theoretical background frameworks had a lot of variation between the studies. There were studies that were more linked to disciplines related to media studies, and then there were studies that were more associated with social sciences and humanities. We investigated the effectiveness of intervention programs against these 8 outcome categories. Some of these were predefined by us, and some of them were added based on our literature review afterwards. And the most common outcome in general was the media literacy and digital skills outcome. So it was quite common that interventions aimed to improve participants' digital skills or attitudes in the digital environments. And the second common outcome category was psychological well-being. So many interventions aimed to improve different dimensions of psychological well-being in the participants. Many interventions reported several outcomes, so it was quite common that one intervention program aimed to improve multiple different outcomes with the same intervention. So, to the main result, how effective were the reported interventions in the literature? After we studied all the effect sizes that were reported in the 119 studies, we noticed that actually 43% of the effect sizes were non-significant. So that's quite a large amount of interventions that did not have any effect on different outcomes. But also we noticed that 25% of the effect sizes were considered as medium or large. So really these effect sizes were having some sort of impact on the different outcomes. We also investigated all effect sizes separately to each of the outcome categories. And like I said earlier, the media literacy and digital skills was the most common outcome that was reported in these interventions, but only 13% of the effect sizes that were related to this outcome were considered as large effects. So many of the interventions that were not that effective in improving digital literacy or digital skills. And then similarly, most of the interventions were not that effective in improving psychological well-being either, because only 4.5% of the effect sizes related to psychological well-being were considered large. And there was quite a lot of variation. There's notable that we also noticed that sample size had some sort of impact on the results, because the larger the sample size was, the smaller the effect sizes were on average. And then interesting thing about target groups was that we identified 9 different target groups. But in the literature, it's actually worth noticing that these target groups are not the focus of our REMEDIS project. So our REMEDIS project target groups were not well presented in the literature. So, for example, socially or economically disadvantaged groups were not present in the literature that much. From this huge table, you can see that children, youth, and college students were the most common target groups. It means that the majority of effect sizes that we calculated from the literature were related to these groups. And here we see that actually among youth, we calculated the most effect sizes. So that's quite common target group in the literature. And within these target groups, media literacy and digital skills, education and learning, and psychological well-being were the most common outcome categories. So interventions related to media literacy and digital skills aim to improve digital skills, education and learning, and psychological well-being the most. But we also see here that young adults and parents clearly were less investigated in the literature. If you're interested to see more detailed information of some specific target group, these are all represented in our report, more detailed. So we investigated effect sizes separately to each target group and each outcome. As a summary, we underscore that the future studies related to media literacy and digital skills should take some aspects into account related to theoretical frameworks, outcomes, and intervention designs, especially. Based on our review, we recommend to diversify outcomes to get a more comprehensive understanding what kind of impact the interventions actually have on the participants. We also highlight that some specific target groups are not presented at all in the current literature. So more research on, for example, economically or socially disadvantaged groups are really needed to get more comprehensive understanding of the interventions and to give interventions to these target groups. And then we also noticed related to methodological considerations that there were a lot of variation between the quality of the research. So in the future studies, more experimental designs would be favorable. We also noticed inconsistencies in reporting the intervention results. So hopefully in the future studies, more accuracy is presented. And sure, our study, like every study, usually has some limitations. So this systematic review is perhaps not telling the whole truth, but is the first of its kind and a good starting point anyways to develop the media literacy and digital skills interventions. Thank you.
Hello and greetings from Tartu as well. So I will very briefly describe what we found in the literature review concerning the moderators and mediators of media literacy and digital skills interventions. My name is Marit Puusepp and I'm from the University of Tartu. Unfortunately, only approximately 15% of the studies in our literature review discussed differentiating factors, for example, moderators or mediators in any form. Only 4 studies actually discussed mediators. And as a mediator, we considered a variable that is part of a causal sequence of effect. There were more studies that considered the moderators or differentiating factors that could be considered to have moderating effect. Although we saw moderators as variables that affect the strength or direction of a relationship between 2 constructs, we had to adopt a more broad interpretation for this review because in the articles we reviewed, often these terms, moderators and mediators, were not used very precisely or not at all. And so we had to consider any variable that influenced the effect of the intervention as a potential moderator. So, for example, when group comparisons were done, we coded those as potential moderators as well. And as Erik already mentioned, the focus also in these studies with differentiating factors was on younger target groups and also more educated target groups. In our case here, for example, youths and teachers, college students, young adults. So this was the general focus of the target groups. There are very few studies with mediators, and all of these focused on media literacy interventions. So no digital skill interventions included mediation analysis. But among those 4 studies, 3 had sequential mediation effects. So apparently cascading effects, detailed models are used when mediation is studied. Nearly all of the effects that were reported were statistically significant. And most outcomes belong to the category of media literacy and digital skills, as Erik also mentioned in this bigger overview of the project. Other outcomes were also mentioned, but the mediators themselves that were studied in these articles were quite diverse. For example, collective efficacy, visual identification, flow. So based on this very limited sample size of 4, we couldn't really make any very concrete conclusions about what types of mediators are used in media literacy and digital skills studies. So there were so the picture with moderation is a bit clearer because there were more studies, but here also the studies focused more on media literacy than digital skills. And interestingly, less than 60% of the effects that were reported were statistically significant. And again, most outcomes belong to media literacy and digital skills, although some other outcome categories were also represented. The most frequent moderators or variables that we considered moderators were the personal or social characteristics of the intervention participants, and the most common being gender. So there were 15 effects studied in 8 studies, and girls and boys were evenly favored in that sample. Age was also a moderator, and in this very limited sample of 4 studies, older participants appeared to improve more than younger ones in the interventions. But the competencies, skills, and literacies, prior experiences, attitudes, intervention characteristics also moderated the outcomes. More detailed results can be seen in the reports. What did emerge as a trend was that participants with a lower previous knowledge base, less advantaged background, or higher levels of biases seem to benefit more from the interventions than those with a more privileged background. So I guess we could say that indeed the interventions work best for those who have most to gain from them. Also, this analysis had some limitations, as you saw, the very limited sample size, especially for mediation. There was ambiguity in the use of terms and also in our coding. We had to adopt a very broad interpretation of the term moderators and had to recode some of the variables. But what to say to conclude and what kind of recommendations can we give? As you saw, quite few media literacy digital skill interventions consider moderating and even fewer mediating effects. Gender was the most frequently studied moderator, and the interventions here were geared toward younger audiences. So definitely one recommendation is that future studies should aim to include a more diverse range of target groups. For example, none of the studies with moderation and mediation covered more vulnerable target groups like the elderly or low socioeconomic status persons. And again, the literature review that we completed highlights the need for more comprehensive research on various mediation and moderation effects in media literacy and digital skills interventions. Here are a few references that you can look up later, and I would also like to thank here my co-contributors for this work and this report. And now I'll give the word to Gemma.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Gemma Martinez. I'm a researcher at the University of the Basque Country. And yeah, today I'm in charge of presenting part of the results of the systematic evidence review. I'm going to focus on the part of the results that lead with barriers and success factors. The results have been already published under deliverable 1.2. And the Finnish teams, the Finnish team, the UK team, and the Spanish team have been mainly in charge of analyzing these results. Well, here, as you can see, we follow the same approach and the same methodology that my colleagues have already mentioned. But in this case, we've analyzed 15 categories that can be found in our coding framework and found in 5 different sections. And the results that we have obtained, we've divided them into 4 different main groups. These are the theoretical framework of the studies that we have analyzed, the characteristics of the interventions, the outcomes that have been already mentioned by my colleagues, and the enablers and barriers that part of the authors consider as factors to the effectiveness of the interventions. Well, the main goals of this part of the analysis was to understand how media literacy and digital skills interventions are represented in the academic literature. We tried to find any gaps in this literature review, and mainly to discern the characteristics of media literacy and digital skills interventions programs that lead to positive outcomes. Here we can see a summary of the results that we are going to present. First, the main findings refer to the theoretical frameworks that we have found in this systematic review. There is a lack of specific theoretical frameworks or leading theories, and those that the coders have found are mainly focused on educational sciences. It called also our attention that in most of the studies, concepts of media literacy or digital literacy have been addressed. Nonetheless, they are not addressed under a main theory or a leading theory. Regarding the description of the interventions, this is the characteristics mostly related to the content, the intervention areas, or the topics that are addressed in most of these studies are related to basic information activities such as accessing, searching, finding and navigating. And it called our attention, that issues such as cyberbullying, privacy and online safety have been underreported. The target groups, as has been already said by my colleagues, the REMEDIS target groups, such as disadvantaged youth, including needs, carers of these needs, unemployed, migrants, or individuals from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, have been underreported. And the main target group of these initiatives are usually pre-service teachers. That was also part of the REMEDIS target group. The types of initiatives are mainly focused on educational backgrounds. This is in forms of offline trainings, online courses, or workshops. But it is quite uncommon to find bottom-up or beneficiary-led initiatives. Regarding the approaches to learning, the most common approach are traditional learning approaches, and it also caught our attention that innovative approaches such as gamification or buddy systems are quite scarce. The targeted skills, instrumental and technical skills, are the most dominant skills addressed in these studies. And unfortunately, social and creative skills related to production or content positive interactions and more critical understanding of how the digital world works are less dominant. Regarding the activities, there is most of the interventions are composed usually by a variety of activities. Again, most of them focus on formal coursework or information or evaluation of information. And less formal activities, in this case, unfortunately, are quite frequent too. Regarding the other group of characteristics of the interventions, the location of the intervention, the most common locations are always formal education settings or digital learning environments. And it's quite rare to find studies where the interventions are delivered in more informal settings, such as home or households or public places, such libraries. Regarding who delivers the intervention, usually the most common group of people who delivers the interventions are teachers. This means teachers, teaching assistants, or people that works at schools. And it is quite rare to find interventions where we can find a peer-to-peer training. And it also called our attention that there is a quite lack of information on the capacitation of the trainers. Yeah, we can consider this a quite important gap. Regarding the intervention providers, most of them are universities, and on the other hand, public services or NGOs, government agencies, or private organizations are not considered the main intervention providers. So there is also a considerable lack on reporting on the experience and the capacity of these organizations for delivering these interventions. Regarding the length of the interventions, it was quite hard to code the length of the interventions, because they range from quite short interventions, that means 32 seconds, to quite long intervention that last more than 1 month. But it's quite interesting that most of the studies targeted are a standalone initiative, and just the 25% of the studies targeted are part of a broader project. This is considered by the authors like a barrier to success of the interventions. Who funds these interventions? What we found is that most of the interventions are funded through public funds, while the third and commercial sector stakeholders are rarely involved in supporting this type of work. And yeah, in most of the studies, the funding or the origin of this funding is not reported. Well, here we have the outcomes. As my colleagues have already mentioned, the outcomes that have been addressed by the authors of these studies mostly are referred to media literacy and digital skills or educational learning. But we lack an understanding of whether people's lives are improved in terms of their economic, social, and cultural well-being, because outcomes like psychological well-being, sociocultural or physical or civic participatory or economic outcomes are not usually addressed. And here we have, this is a part of these results. We did parallel analysis, like a qualitative content analysis on two questions of this systematic literature review. And we could find 76 studies that reported success factors. These factors or recommendation by different authors are mainly focused on the participants' role. And there is a stress on considering the needs, the specific needs and the characteristics of the participants, and also consider the participant as a central and active part of the design of the intervention activities, as well as the socioeconomic status, the cultural context, and the country that the participants come from. Apart from this, another factor that is considered like a factor of success for these interventions is the need of insights from external organization, from professionals, from universities or NGOs. And regarding the implementation phases, it's been proved, according to the literature review, that the length of the intervention, this is in terms of duration and frequency, affects in the effectiveness, to the effectiveness of the intervention. It is also recommended to establish a follow-up for the activities in order to make this program sustainable. And it is also necessary to make sure that those who deliver the intervention do have enough expertise. And in the second term, there are also we also found different factors or barriers that that will not permit that these interventions will be as successful. And this is overlooking personal and individual characteristics of the individuals that that participate in these interventions. Also, an imbalanced level of the beneficiaries in accordance to the contents can be a barrier. The lack of access to digital device of the beneficiaries represents also a barrier. Technical issues during these programs represent also another barrier. And the location, for example, as most of the the programs that we have analyzed are located in schools, it is needed to find an appropriate size of the room without disruptions, taking in account participant schedules. And again, it is necessary to take in account the expertise of those who deliver the interventions. It's been reported that usually there is insufficient hands-on practice from these trainers. There is a lack of clear objectives, and there is a lack of guidance to the participants, and this can lead into an unsuccessful program. The length of the intervention, short interventions, seem also to be the most unsuccessful programs. Regarding the methodology applied, it seems that a lack of control group or weak manipulation between the control and treatment conditions does limit the measurement of the effectiveness. And the self-reports to evaluate the effectiveness of the programs without a pre and post design can be also a barrier. At the same time, large gaps between administering the intervention and measuring the outcomes can be also considered like a barrier to achieve a successful intervention. In conclusions, I'm not going to mention all of them, but the main one is that, as you could see, most of the interventions that we've detected or that we've located in our studies are centered around educational settings, and this influences the goals, the locations, the involved actors. And I repeat, it called our attention that issues that are at the moment in the public, debated in the public discourse and are a concern for the public in general, such as cyberbullying, privacy, and online safety, were not often the subject of these interventions. We've also detected a lack of research by industry or non-profit organizations. In most of the studies, reporting the origin of the funding was something that did not have, that was not enough stressed, or sometimes we couldn't even find this information. We need new theoretical approaches. We need new theoretical approaches that will integrate not only educational studies, but also media studies to help practitioners and researchers to implement and analyze media literacy and digital skills interventions. And we also could see that there is a lack of evaluation on the impact of interventions on those interventions that are not focused on literacy or skills related outcomes. There is a gap on critical knowledge about how the digital world works and how media content is created. This was underrepresented in our studies. And non-conventional formats were rarely applied. There is also a lack of information on the capacitation of those who deliver the intervention. Vulnerable groups were paid little attention, and target groups were defined in quite narrow ways. Locations of the intervention, like people's homes and public access venues, were rarely considered, and this contradicts the factors that the author suggested that would be conducive to the success of the interventions. This is to finish my presentation. It is a recommendation that mixing data collection methods, large size measurements, and control groups contribute to get more robust and generalizable findings. And the instrument that we use should incorporate other data sources different from self-reports to avoid confirmation bias. And thank you for your attention. This is Diego.
Okay, thank you. This is Diego Martinez. I am from the London School of Economics and Political Science, and I will present our proposal of the theoretical framework and the next steps of the REMEDIS project. One second. Well, at the center of our framework, we have a broader digital environment in which the participants of the interventions exist, and the access and services that are available for them. And we have an external environment, which is basically the national international policies, the economic and cultural characteristics of the country or the region in which the intervention takes place, and basically the context in which the participants live. Based on this external environment, the organizations that are running these interventions try to affect some like media literacy and digital skills, the conditions of the participants. But these organizations have also a specific purpose. They have some key stakeholders. They use different formats. So it is not the same, the interventions that are run by volunteers or by paid professionals. It is not the same when, as our colleagues mentioned before, the interventions that are like 30 seconds long or 2 months long. So all these characteristics of the intervention and the organization that runs the intervention is affecting the intervention. So basically we have 3 main dimensions in which we expect to understand how the digital environment of participants is changing. and is in terms of access, in terms of the media literacy and digital skills, and the engagement in online activities, for example, or using media or producing media, either as passive or as active individual or users, basically. And this is also shaped by their motivations and attitudes towards the use of technology or using diffusion. It creates some expected outcomes that the organization expects based on their analysis of the needs and the project, the scope of the project. And we will have also some observed outcomes in different dimensions, in economical, social, personal, and other dimensions related to well-being of these individuals. This is going to be the general framework we are using in the further stages. So, to mention the next steps, we will have the co-development, which is the second work package, in which we are working with our local partners to work with this theoretical framework, trying to understand how it can be used and operationalized, basically. We are trying to select and characterize specific interventions or projects. Some of these partners might run different parallel interventions, so we are trying to focus on one or a few. And the idea is trying to reflect on what changes should be made in order to improve the impact or increase the outcomes that the intervention has, and develop an implementation plan based on the pertinence and feasibility of these changes. Sometimes these changes cannot be made immediately, because they also have to negotiate with funders or other stakeholders, or some changes are not immediate. And finally, we have to design the evaluation of the intervention. So we are at the same time developing a questionnaire to evaluate what is the effect of these interventions. So we try to start with a core 10-minute long instrument, and we need to plan what the right measuring times and dates are for each intervention. This is just a quick overview of a canvas we are using with our partners. So for each dimension that are related to the theoretical framework, we try to propose some prompting questions in order to understand how the partners conceive the use of their interventions, or why they propose the project as it is now. And we try to find, based on these instruments and the answers we have, potential improvements of the current interventions. Finally, we start to design the evaluation process. We will have 4 key parts. The first part is related to personal characteristics and socio-demographic data. The second part of the instrument is focused on access and media literacy, digital skills and knowledge. And the part C is related to uses and outcomes in some specific domains, like learning, well-being, social, finance, and occupation. The part D is also quite linked to the part C, but this part D is asking for future use and outcomes. So we will have the same domains of the part C, but not in current uses or outcomes, but the future or expected use of and outcomes after the intervention. So this is like the quick plan, the guide we have to implement this questionnaire. So initially, this is like the most ambitious view of the evaluation. So we will try to use the first 3 parts just before the intervention starts. And as soon as the intervention ends, we will try to apply the part D, and optionally the part A if we cannot like match the data from the beginning. And at least 1 month later, we will apply again the parts B and C. As some of you can like understand, we have like several limitations. The interventions might be quite short. For example, in 1 hour interventions, this application would take a lot of time, and it would be like affecting negatively the actual impact that these interventions have if we take a lot of time. So we are trying to propose different plans according to the particularities of the interventions. So optionally, we have the application of the 3 parts, and only after 1 month after the intervention, we try to run like the same part, the B and C parts. Otherwise, just immediately post the intervention, we can we try to apply the first 3 parts before the intervention, and finally, just after the intervention ends, try to use the part D, and in other cases, just applying the part A and B, and the part D at the end. Just like in very rare cases, we will only apply part A and D if the time is like really a real constraint in the intervention, and if the application of these instruments could affect negatively the development of these interventions. Finally, in the work package 4, we are trying to integrate the results. So the idea is trying to work on policy recommendations based on the evidence, and aimed at existing media literacy and digital skills intervention, and hopefully co-developing with the partners again an evaluation guide and a toolkit on how to prepare the evaluation, and like a more detailed process, a guidance on how to process and analyze the data. That's it for now. So we are passing to Q&A.
Okay, thank you, presenters. There's a lot of information, and luckily we now have time for a few quick questions and answers. So if anyone from the audience wants to ask something, you should be able to raise your hand, and you will be given a turn to talk. And if not, you can also post to the question Q&A section there, and we have some small questions there already that have been answered. So I can probably go here if nobody wants to raise their hand. So we can see here that it has been asked, what is the difference between teaching and interventions? And Lynn has said that teaching can be a part of interventions. The intervention can consist of other components, for example, news games. And Lucas has also stated that the type of method from a didactic resource uses depends on the learning objective and specific biopsychosocial functioning of the target group. And also there is another question, what was the general conclusion of the study again? And Lean has answered that there are several conclusions that can be made. Duration of the intervention is a critical success factor. Professional trainers are important. A clear theory of change is key. And also there is a very great policy brief on the website under news that you can go and see, and it has really clear conclusions of the study. Simi, is there something else that I have been missing?
Thank you. Well, Lucas has written in the Q&A section. So in general, many activities related to digital inclusion are carried out by non-professionals, for example, people without knowledge of educational methodology and without full knowledge of learning processes, like, for example, how senior citizens learn. So many digital skills and media literacy shaping activities are carried out intuitively and therefore without theoretical basis by non-professionals. And this is the biggest challenge. So for more information, there is a link for this topic over here. So that's a good point from Lucas.
Okay, thank you. I don't think we have any raised hands or further questions. So is there anything any presenters want to still add? But if not, you can also send us email through the website and contact us through the social media channels. So please follow us and the proceedings of this project. But for now, I want to thank all of the presenters and everyone in the audience for listening to us. Have a very great week. Goodbye.